Let me tell you something that I never thought I'd have to do. I never thought I'd be the kind of person who sits down in front of a camera or a microphone to defend themselves. I was raised to believe that silence is dignity. That if you know the truth about yourself, you don't need to prove it to anyone. But here's what nobody tells you about silence. Silence doesn't protect you. Silence just gives other people more room to fill with their version of events. And that's exactly what happened to me. My ex lied about me. Not just in private. Not just to mutual friends over a phone call. They went online publicly, deliberately, and painted a picture of me that I barely recognized. A version of me that was cruel, unstable, manipulative, and dangerous. And people believed it. People who'd never met me. People who'd never seen the two of us together. People who had nothing but a series of Instagram stories and Twitter threads to go on. And for a while I stayed quiet. I thought it would blow over. I thought people who knew me would speak up. I thought the truth had a way of coming out on its own. It didn't. So today, I'm going to tell you everything. The real story. My story. Not to bash anyone, not to start a war, but because I owe it to myself, and honestly, I think I owe it to you too, especially if you've ever been in a position where someone rewrote your history without your permission. This is what happened. This is what it did to me. And this is how I finally decided to take my narrative back. We were together for almost 2.5 years. I'm not going to say it was perfect, because no relationship is. We had our good seasons and our bad ones. There were nights that felt like something out of a movie: road trips with the windows down, cooking dinner together at midnight, laughing so hard we couldn't breathe. And there were other nights. Harder nights. Nights where we said things we didn't mean, or nights where we said nothing at all and that silence felt heavier than any argument. I'm not here to villainize them. I want to be really clear about that. Because what I'm about to say is not about revenge. It's not about getting the last word. It's about accuracy. It's about the fact that a story was told about me, my character, my behavior, my mental health, and every single major claim in that story was either exaggerated, taken wildly out of context, or completely fabricated. The breakup itself was mutual in many ways. We had grown in different directions. There were incompatibilities that neither of us could fix, no matter how much we tried. I won't pretend I was a perfect partner. I made mistakes. I have things I genuinely regret, moments where I wasn't as patient as I should have been, or times when I shut down instead of communicating. But that's different from what was said about me. There's a difference between being an imperfect person in a relationship and being the monster that was described online. It started about 3 weeks after we broke up. I noticed a vague post on their story. Something about finally being free from toxicity. I saw it, felt a sting, and let it go. People post things when they're hurting. I wasn't going to make it a thing. Then came the longer post. It was a full caption, I'm talking paragraphs. Posted to their main feed, not just a story. It described a relationship with someone never named me directly, but everyone who knew us knew exactly who it was about, where they described being emotionally manipulated, gaslit constantly, made to feel worthless, and controlled. I read it 3 times because I genuinely could not believe what I was reading. The comments were immediate. Hundreds of people validating every word. You're so strong for leaving. I always knew something was off. You deserve so much better. People who had sat across from us at dinner tables, people who had seen us interact, were now piling on. And then it spread. Screenshots got shared. Mutual friends started distancing themselves. I had someone I'd known for years send me a message that just said, "I think we need some space." No explanation. Just, space. I had a work contact someone I'd been building a professional relationship with for months go cold. I later found out they'd seen the posts through a mutual connection. I was being tried and convicted in the court of public opinion and I wasn't even allowed in the room. Now I want to get into the actual claims. Because I think this is the part that matters most. I'm not going to be vague about this, because vagueness is what allowed the lies to spread in the first place. Claim 1, that I was financially controlling. This one almost made me laugh if it hadn't been so painful. The truth, for the last 8 months of our relationship, I was covering the majority of our shared expenses. Not because I demanded control but because they were going through a difficult period professionally and I wanted to support them. I have bank records. I have Venmo transactions. I have text messages from them thanking me for covering rent, for paying for trips, for picking up the slack without complaint. Financially controlling. Right. Claim 2, that I isolated them from their friends. This is perhaps the most painful one because it's the furthest from reality. I actively encouraged, sometimes pushed them to spend time with their friends. I planned solo weekends specifically so they could have that space. I remember specific conversations where I said, "Go. Be with your people. I'll be here when you get back." Their friends can corroborate this. Some of them have already reached out to me privately to say they never saw any of what was described. They were as shocked as I was. Claim 3, that I had rage episodes. I raised my voice during arguments. Yes. We both did. That's a true statement, but the characterization in the post made it sound like I was volatile, unpredictable, even physically frightening. That is not what happened. We argued like two people who cared deeply and sometimes communicated poorly. Never, not once, was there anything that could be reasonably described as a rage episode. Anyone who spent time around us during our relationship knows this. Claim 4, that I threatened them. This one I will address clearly and directly, it is false. It did not happen. There are no messages, no voicemails, no witnesses, no evidence of any kind because there is nothing to find. I don't say this defensively. I say it factually. This claim, if taken seriously, has legal implications, and I have consulted with people about exactly that. I want to talk about this part honestly, because I think it's important and it's the part that doesn't get discussed enough when we talk about online pile-ons and public call-outs. People think that if you're innocent, the truth will protect you. That you can just ride it out. That people will eventually figure it out. What actually happened was this: I stopped sleeping properly. Not because of guilt, I had nothing to be guilty about, but because my nervous system was in a constant state of alarm. Every time I opened my phone, I didn't know what I was going to find. A new share. A new comment. A new person who decided they knew who I was. I became hypervigilant in social situations. I'd walk into a room and wonder who had seen the posts. Who had already made up their mind about me. I started canceling plans because the anxiety of being around people who might have a preformed negative opinion of me was overwhelming. My work suffered. I'm someone who takes a lot of pride in what I do, and for several weeks I was just going through the motions. Showing up physically but not really present. I lost friends. Not many, and honestly, the ones I lost probably weren't the ones who truly knew me, but it still hurts. There's a particular grief in watching someone you cared about choose a narrative over a relationship. And the worst part, the loneliness of it all. Because when you're being lied about publicly, there's this strange isolation that settles in. You can't really talk about it with most people because it sounds defensive. You can't fully process it because every time you try to think about it, the anger and the hurt and the disbelief get tangled up together. You feel fundamentally unseen not just by the person who lied, but by everyone who believed them without question. There was a specific moment. I was at a small gathering, maybe 8 or 10 people, and I overheard a conversation where someone was referencing what happened with my ex, and the way they described me. I didn't recognize myself at all. It was like hearing a character in a story who just happened to share my name. And something shifted. I had been operating under the assumption that this was temporary, that it was a phase of post-breakup emotion that would fade. But standing in that room, hearing the way the story had calcified had become accepted as fact, I realized, this isn't going away on its own. I went home that night and I sat with it for a long time. I thought about all the reasons not to speak up. I'd give them more attention. It would look defensive. People might think I'm the one who can't move on. There might be more backlash. And then I thought about one thing, the truth. I know what happened. I have evidence of what happened. I have messages, records, and witnesses who were present for the actual relationship, not just the social media version of it. And I thought about everyone else out there who has been in this position. Who has been publicly misrepresented and felt like they had no recourse. Who swallowed it because saying anything felt like it would make them look worse. I decided I wasn't going to do that. I want to be clear about how I approached this, because I didn't do it perfectly, but I tried to do it carefully. First, I talked to people I trust. Not to gather an army, but to reality check myself. I needed to know that what I was planning to do was grounded, not reactive. I needed someone to tell me if I was missing something. They confirmed what I already knew, the claims were false, the approach I was planning was measured, and I had every right to respond. Second, I gathered what I had. I'm not going to go into every detail here, but I will say this, when you actually live through a relationship honestly, you have receipts. Text conversations that tell a completely different story than the one being presented. Financial records. Photos. Timestamps. Context. Third, I made a decision about format. I didn't want to make a post that was emotionally reactive. I didn't want it to look like I was throwing mud. I wanted it to be clear, calm, and factual. I wanted anyone reading it to walk away thinking, okay, I understand what actually happened, not these two people are both a mess. So I wrote something. I took several days to write it. I revised it multiple times. I had people I trust read it before I posted it. What I published addressed the specific claims directly. Not vaguely. Not emotionally. Specifically. I referenced dates. I included context that had been left out. I provided the version of events that had been erased from the public narrative. I didn't call them names. I didn't make counter-accusations that weren't directly relevant to what had been said about me. I wasn't interested in destroying someone, I was interested in correcting a record. I won't pretend it all went smoothly. There was pushback. Some people doubled down. Some people accused me of being unable to take accountability, which is a frustrating response when the specific claims being made are false, but I understood where it was coming from. In a world where public call-outs have become a form of accepted truth, responding to one reads as inherently suspicious to some people. But something else happened too. People reached out privately. A lot of them. Some were mutual acquaintances who said they were relieved to hear my perspective. Some were people I barely knew who said something like, "I want you to know I don't believe what was said." A few were people who had initially been part of the pile-on who quietly apologized. And some of them, the ones I wasn't expecting, were strangers. People who had never met me, who had seen both the original posts and my response, who reached out to say, "I've been through something like this. Thank you for showing that it's possible to respond with dignity." That last group is part of why I'm doing this video. Because if there's one person watching this right now who is in the middle of what I went through, who is being lied about, who feels like the narrative has been taken out of their hands, who is trying to figure out if they have any right to respond, I want you to know, you do. This experience changed me. In some ways I didn't expect. It made me more careful about what I believe online. Before this, if I saw a post where someone described a difficult relationship, I would have been sympathetic without thinking critically. Now I understand that every story has architecture choices about what to include and what to leave out, what to emphasize and what to minimize. I try to hold more space for complexity now. It made me understand the difference between accountability and capitulation. True accountability means acknowledging what you actually did wrong. It does not mean accepting a false characterization because the social pressure to do so is overwhelming. I did things wrong in that relationship. I've owned those things privately, to the people who matter. That's real accountability. Publicly agreeing with lies is not. It made me think about the culture of call-outs. I'm not saying that people who have been genuinely wronged shouldn't speak out. They should. But there's a version of online accountability culture that has become a kind of sport where the person being called out has no legitimate avenue to respond without being labeled as defensive, and where the crowd functions as judge and jury with a fraction of the relevant information. That's not justice. That's mob dynamics with a good-sounding vocabulary. It made me value real relationships differently. The people who stood by me during this, who didn't need me to convince them, who knew me and trusted what they knew, those people are irreplaceable. I have more appreciation for them than I can express. And it made me braver. Not in a dramatic way, but in a quiet way. I know now that I can hold my ground. That I don't have to shrink to make other people more comfortable. That the truth, even when it's inconvenient, even when it costs something to tell it, is worth telling. I want to speak directly to you for a moment. If you've been lied about publicly, privately, whatever the scale, I want to say something that nobody said to me when I needed to hear it. Your experience of what happened is valid. You don't have to accept a version of events that you know to be false just because someone told it with more confidence or gathered a bigger audience. You are allowed to tell the truth. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying there won't be consequences. People might not believe you at first. The person who lied might double down. The crowd that formed against you might not fully dissolve. But your integrity, your sense of your own story, your ability to look at yourself honestly and say, I know what I did and what I didn't do, that is worth protecting. Don't let someone else's narrative become the official record of your life. Take your time. Do it thoughtfully. Don't let hurt make you reckless, because recklessness gives people ammunition to dismiss you. Be clear. Be factual. Be calm if you can, even when you're screaming on the inside. And then let it go into the world, and trust that the people who are capable of thinking critically will think critically. You can't control what everyone believes. You can only control what you put out. I'm in a different place now than I was when all of this started. I'm not going to say I'm completely over it. I think experiences like this leave a mark, and that's okay. But I'm not living under it anymore. I'm not flinching every time someone I know sees me for the first time in months. I'm not bracing for the next wave. I told the truth. Not perfectly, not without cost, but honestly and with evidence. And whatever people choose to do with that is on them. What's on me, what's mine to keep, is knowing that I didn't disappear. That I didn't let someone else's story become the only story. That I showed up for myself the way I would have shown up for anyone I loved who'd been treated this way. If you're still watching, thank you. Whether you found this because you've been through something similar, or because you know me personally, or just because the title caught your attention and you were curious, I appreciate you giving me the time to tell this fully. Don't let anyone write your story for you. That's the whole thing. Take care of yourselves.